Now the quilt top is pieced, so it's time to start putting the finishing touches on the quilt. Now today we're going to do the prep for the embroidery and get this quilt to the next step. Hey friends, it's Barbara Sue at Kowalski Mountain and welcome back to the homestead. Now this is the third video in the baby quilt series where I am making a baby quilt for our newest granddaughter, Rose Marie. And her baby quilt has a wildflower theme as requested by her mommy. If you've missed the other videos in the series, I'm going to be sure to put a link for you right up here. Now I was so eager to get started on the quilting, I almost skipped this step. Now before I can do the quilting of this quilt, I need to finish the embroidery. Now all of my baby quilts, I have put a poem or a quote along with the baby's name embroidered onto the baby quilt. Now the quote for Rose Marie was actually picked out by her mom, which is, "In a field full of roses, she is a wildflower." Now I've printed the words onto paper and I need to transfer that information or trace it onto my quilt so I can do the embroidery. Now I do that with a light table. Now the easiest way to do a DIY light table is if you have a dining room table that has a leaf in it. Just pull the table apart so that the opening for the leaf is open, and then put a piece of glass over it. I used to use the glass from my end tables. It was a large piece of glass. It's made out of plate glass, so I didn't have to worry about it shattering. I don't have those end tables anymore. So this glass actually came out of my refrigerator. Now, it's also plate glass, so I don't need to worry about it shattering. And it's a pretty good size to do what we need to do. Now, here in the RV, I don't have a table that has a leaf in it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use my light. Now this is the light that normally would be on this side, lighting up my face. These are my lights that I use for my video. And I'm going to turn that on. And because this light is flat, I'm just going to lay the light right underneath the glass and use it to trace that way. Now since I pulled this out of the refrigerator, I did wash it before we got started. And if you remember from the previous video, now my quilt is directional. Because this has vines on it that go up and down, I want to make sure that I do this right. I don't want my quilt to be upside down. Now before I get started, I laid this out on my bed where I could look at it really well so I could kind of place it. Now I'm still kind of torn about this one. The top line. The type A part of me says to center it, but I kind of don't want it centered. Actually, it's going to be kind of a pain to stitch over this. I think I'm going to off-center it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper that I printed that on. I am going to tape this down to my glass because I don't need that to move while I'm doing this. And I'm just, sorry, without this light, my lighting is really weird today. I'm just going to trace with a pencil. Now, I do have a water-soluble pen that I could do this with instead. The reason I'm not going to do it, and I don't know if you can hear, but it's raining outside. And it's been raining, it's very muddy outside, so we have a lot of moisture here. This will actually disappear just from the moisture in the air. And embroidery takes a little bit of time, so I don't want the words to disappear before I can finish it. So I'm going to use the pencil just to make sure that my letters don't dissolve. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to place my quilt on my little DIY light table and I'm going to trace it. don't know if you can see that. It looks a little high to me. I know why. It's because of the F. It looks high because the F comes way down, and so that meant I had to space it that way. So it looks high. It's gonna be perfect. And I just keep doing that till I get all of this traced on here. So all the tracing is done, and now we can start the embroidery. Let me put this light back up so you can see me a little better. Now, if you don't have any fancy lights like that, you don't have to use anything fancy to make your DIY light table. All you need is a piece of glass and a light source. I used to put a lamp on the floor underneath the table, and that was enough light to be able to do the job, and it didn't cost me anything. I had things at home that I could use. Now, I chose a pink embroidery floss to do my words in because I wanted this to pop off the quilt. I wanted it to have some definition to it. I can find the end of this. Now, when you use embroidery floss, you want to choose a usable length. Now, it's tempting to cut a long piece so you don't have to do it as often, but you need something that's a usable length that you can work with, because too long you're going to get tangled and you're going to have all kinds of problems like that. Now, this is not my favorite embroidery hoop. I like a square hoop that allows you to turn the fabric. I have to be missing a box of quilting stuff because I don't know where that is either. Or I just haven't found it yet. So I've centered my text in my embroidery hoop, and to kind of keep it from getting dirty, you can roll the edges, you know, because you're going to be holding on this quite a bit, and you don't want the oils from your hands to, you know, transfer to it. Obviously, I wash my hands, but I try to be careful about handling the front of the quilt too much so I don't make it dirty. Now, this is called a chatelaine. And I made it many years ago in my Quilters Guild, and I'll be honest, I almost never wear it. The idea is that you have everything you need. I have my scissors, I have my threads, I have my needles, and you put it around your neck. I almost never wear it, but I always use it because, for the same reason, everything is all together. Now, for embroidery, you also want to use a thimble, and I put out my middle finger. You don't have to use a thimble. And you can get thimbles if you have long nails. You can get a thimble that has a cutout for your nail. I use that too, works great. But you will get tender fingers if you don't use a thimble. Now, because I want this to be bold, I am going to be using a double thread. And this is a very usable length that I can work with. Now, I've tied a knot on the end. And now I'm just going to start sewing it. So all I'm going to be doing is tracing my lettering. Now we just keep doing that until we finish the text. Now the nice thing about this, the only really requirement that you have is good lighting. You can do this anywhere. You can take this in the car, you can sit in your bed, you can sit at the couch. You can be comfortable while you work on this step. Now, especially working on white, you want to be careful traveling too far across sections on the back, because this bright color we might see it. So I'm just going to run a stitch right through the bottom. And then I'm going to pick up back again at the bottom. All right, first word. Now you can tell this is going to take a while, so I'm going to be back when it's done. All right, now we are ready to go on to the next stage of quilt making. I have finished the embroidery on the quilt. It has the baby's name and the little quote that my daughter selected. Now, I've already gone ahead and made a quilt sandwich. Now the quilt sandwich is just what it sounds like. It is a sandwich of the layers of the quilt. So I have my backing fabric, which is this green. I have my batting, which is the plush layer in between. And then I have my quilt top. Now ideally, I like to do this on the floor where I can lay the quilt out to its full size, layer all the fabric so I can do it without moving it at all, but that just wasn't going to work out. It's winter in Kentucky, and even though we don't wear our boots in here and we do our best to keep the floors clean, they're dirtier than I'd like them to be, and come spring they're getting shampooed. But for now, we're dealing with it. I didn't want to put my beautiful quilt on this floor that didn't meet my standard of cleanliness. So I went ahead and did this on the table, which worked out pretty good. It's nice to have the solid surface underneath so you can push the safety pins through. Right now this is safety pinned together while I do the quilting. Now we're actually doing the quilting step. Quilting is when you sew together layers of fabric. Now when you do that, you always start in the middle. So when I started pinning in the center, and I worked my way to one side and I worked my way to the top and, you know, to the other side. So you want, because the fabric can move, you want it to move out so that it lays nice and flat. And I was satisfied with how it laid, so I went ahead and cut my fabrics to match. Now you'll also notice there's always a little extra edge here. That's also just in case it moves anymore. We don't want it to move off the back of the fabric because that would be bad. So I always leave a little more than I really need to. Now I use a cotton batting. This is 100% cotton. And this batting is very thin. I know you've probably seen quilts that have really thick plush batting inside, but I like the nice cotton batting. This is especially nice if we were hand quilting, which we're not, but it's very easy and nice to quilt through, and this is just a really nice batting. Now a special tool that we use for doing the quilting, this is called a walking foot, and I had one. I don't know where it is. Somehow it's gotten lost. So what the walking foot is on your sewing machine, you have the little feet on the bottom that feed the fabric through the machine. Now when you're sewing multiple layers of fabric, these little feet here on the bottom are only moving the bottom layer of the fabric. You need the top layer to move as well. And that's what the walking foot does, is it feeds the top of the fabric through as it's feeding the bottom. So to attach this, I'm just going to take off the regular foot. And they do tell you to turn off your machine. I'm leaving that on so you can see a little bit better. And we're just going to fit this foot right where that one was. Now this is what's going to cause it to walk. This little foot right up here, I don't know if you can see that, right up here, is what's going to make this walk. So now when we do it, you can see these little feet here moving as well with it. And that happens with this little foot right here, moving it up and down. So this batting actually gives us some guidelines about how far apart our quilting can be. And it's a lot more than I expected. This can be up to 8 inches apart. So that means that my quilting seams can be 8 inches apart. Now that's quite a bit to me. I will do a little smaller than that. But you want to check your batting to follow the guidelines of what your batting needs, because you want to hold the layers together so that it doesn't rip up inside. Like in the washing machine, you wouldn't want the batting inside of the quilt to get damaged, and then it would cause, you know, like lumps, and it just wouldn't be pretty anymore. Now, just like the pinning, we start the quilting in the center as well. Now I do a quilting technique called stitch in the ditch. And what that means is I'm going to sew in between the seams of my fabrics. That's where there's defined seams, where I'm stitching in the ditch of the seam rip. And I'm just going to go around this little star, like I call this the these are supposed to be like the stems of the flowers, kind of. Now, even though I'm machine quilting, this is still a time-consuming process. Now, I'm going to go around these green triangles. I'm going to go around every flower. I'm going to go around every square. And then on the outside, I have a plan. I have a thought. I want to kind of make it look like a basket by going back and forth, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do that. We'll see. I got a long way before I get to the outside edge. Now when I want to make a turn, I don't cut my thread. I just raise up my presser foot. And I turn my fabric. And this is where all that pinning is coming together, because it's holding all the layers together. Now, especially with hand quilting, that's part of the art. You can stitch designs, and although we're doing a design as well, it's not so much about the stitching as it is about the functionality of holding the quilt together. Oh my gosh. Oh no. And I've just found a problem. This is the problem with my sewing machine. Is my tension. That's my machine's tension. And I told you that it just, I gotta stop. I need to see if I can troubleshoot that. Well, I've made some adjustments and it looks a lot better than it did. Let's hope it holds out. So I'm going slow and steady, trying to let my machine do the work, not push it, and fingers crossed I can get this done without any more issues. Well, it looks like I have solved the tension problem for the most part. Now my machine still has trouble with tension, but it's a lot better than that was. Now you can see that this quilting is going to take a long time, so I'm going to get to it. Now my baby quilt is coming along. I have mostly finished the quilting. I've quilted around every flower. I did around my edges, and I did around these green sections that look like the stems. And this is where I love to look at the back of a quilt, and you can see the design made with the quilting. Now in a machine quilted quilt, that's less of a focus, but on a hand quilted quilt, it's all about the quilting. Now one section I have not yet quilted is here in this border, and I've spent so much time thinking about it. I think I'm going to keep it simple. Once I put the binding on it, I think I'm just going to do a single line through the center. Technically, I don't need to quilt it at all, because remember, as long as I've quilted within 8 inches, it's close enough. And this is only a 4-inch border, so I can get away without doing it. I'll think about that. I haven't decided. Now today we're going to make the bias binding. Now if you watched my last quilting video on the section where I did the finishing, I talked about a chart that I used to do my bias binding, and I found it. I'm so excited. At least I found something. I have searched on this online, and now that I know the name of it, I also looked for it on Amazon so I could give you a link to it, but it's not available, which is too bad because this has helped me so much. Now for this baby quilt, I have about 154 inches of edge, and you always need to add to that. Now I'm going to make a 2.5 inch biased binding. Now to get enough bias binding, I need to cut a square to cut my binding with. Now according to my chart, I'm going to have to go with 180 inches of binding, which means I'm going to have more than I need. But I'm going to have to do a 22-inch square. Now I've already cut that out, and I went ahead and folded it and ironed it. It's hard to measure this and cut it, so what I did was I ironed it, and now I'm going to open it and I'm going to cut it on this fold line. Now why do I do a bias binding? A lot of people make binding on their quilts with straight binding. That's you just cut strips of binding and sew it on your quilt. Those go with the grain. A bias binding goes against the grain. It's cut across the grain. And the reason we do that is because it's stretchy. See how stretchy that is? If I pull with the grain, there's not as much stretchiness. Now, why does that matter? I hope that Rosemarie loves her baby quilt. I hope that her mommy uses it when she's a baby. I hope that Rosemarie snuggles on the couch, rolled up in her quilt. I hope she drags it all over the place. I can't help but think of her mommy sucking her thumb. When Faith was a baby, she used to take the edge of her quilt and she'd suck her thumb. And she'd hold it right on the binding and she'd suck her thumb. So on her baby quilts, it would always wear out along the edge because she wore them out. Faith was a blankie baby, and I weaned her from her blanket by cutting it in half. So she would wear out her quilt, I would cut it in half, I'd rebind it, I'd give it back to her. So it was smaller. And she'd wear it out again. I'd cut it out. I got it down to a little square, and I don't know if she still has that or not. But it was well loved because she would wear her quilts out. And I hope that Rosemarie loves her quilts as much as Faith did. So the reason that I need that bias binding is because it wears better. Because this stretches like this, it's going to give. It can take all the wear and tear a lot better than a straight cut. Now, Faith didn't wear out the binding on her quilt. She actually wore out the quilt itself. Like, she would wear out this part, not the binding, and there's not much I can do about that. But that's why I go to all this effort to make a bias binding. Now, this does take a little bit of effort, but don't worry, it's not that hard. All right, so hopefully you can see me. I'm really competing with the sunlight today. All right, so I have my square, and I'm just going to cut in my ironing line. Now I'm going to pick up this bottom, and I'm going to lay it across the top. And I'm going to pin that. So now I have a piece that looks like this, and I'm going to sew that seam. All right, now I still have my walking foot on my machine, which is perfectly fine. I'm not done with it yet, so I don't want to change it out yet. Now I have a piece that looks like this. And before we can move on to the next step, I need to press this. So I'll be right back for the next step. Now that we have done that, we are going to make lines on our fabric, and we're going to do 2.5 inch. Now that's where we're going to use our ruler to do that. So I'm going to use my 2.5 inch mark, which would be, here's 1 inch, 2 inch, 1.5. I'm going to place that along the edge of my fabric, and I'm using a dissolvable ink. It doesn't matter, you could use pencil for this. And I'm going to draw that line on here, as long as I can see it. Yeah, barely. You could also use like a chalk line, that would work really well. Okay, and we're going to do all the way across. So this next one, I'm going to use my line, and this is where I can't see it very well. Okay, I'm going to switch to a laundry marking pen because I cannot see that. Much better, I can see it now. And I'm going to mark all across the line, all the lines. So now I have my lines marked. Now I'm a little off. I don't understand why that's not right. Now this is where it's going to get a little bit interesting. Now we're going to line these up offset so it creates a coil. So here you can see that I've lined this up so it's offset. So when I start cutting, this strip is going to be separate. But we're going to sew it first. Now this is where the magic is going to happen. Because I've made my lines, now I'm simply going to cut along my lines. Now this is called continuous bias binding, because if I've done it right, I'm going to have one big long strand of bias binding. Now I'm a little concerned about this edge because it's not 2.5 inches, and I don't know why, because I used the chart this time. This is the same thing that happened in my other video. And here it is. One long strip of binding. Now let's make sure I've got enough. It happened again. I am off. I don't know the problem now. I'm going to come up like 18 inches short. I gotta fix this. Now I'm annoyed because I've done this twice now and I don't know why. Okay. Well, I went ahead and did about double what I need to, because I don't want any more surprises. Now I'm going to fold this in half. And iron the entire length of bias binding. Now the towel helps my tabletop iron not to rock. So here's the binding. It's all ironed and it's ready to go on the quilt. It's my personal preference that my binding match the back of my quilt. Now I would have really have liked that vine fabric to be on the back of the quilt, but Joann's didn't have enough of it to do that. So that's why I'm using the green. Now it's important to me that all of my quilts have a label. And that's because a quilt is a heritage gift. I'm giving a gift to my granddaughter that I hope that someday that she might share with her own children, and a little bit of me gets passed on to the next generation. So all of my quilts, I like to have a label so that they know who made the quilt and who it was made for. Now, as I'm thinking about this is going to kind of solidify that my quilting is done, because once this goes down, I will not be able to add any more quilting to it, which is fine. I think that's fine. I'm happy with the quilting I have, and it's well within the 6 inch or the 8 inches. So I think it's going to be great. Now we're going to start sewing the binding onto the quilt. Now we never start in a corner, and that's because we have to meet the two ends together, and you don't want to do that in a corner. Now the other thing you want to do is you want to leave plenty of space at the end so you have a lot to work with. Now I'm going to leave more than I need to. That way I don't have any trouble. Now remember, this is a bias binding, so that means it's really easy to stretch and pull it. So we don't want to stretch as we're sewing. We want to try to keep it as relaxed as possible because we don't want it to bunch up when we're done. Now when I get to the end, I'm going to sew until about 1/4 of an inch from the end. So I stopped 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and I'll pull it up, and then I'm going to pull my binding over so it makes a triangle, and then I'm going to fold it back over to the other edge. I'm going to pull that out, turning, and I reset back underneath. My needle back into the fabric, and I continue sewing. Now what that did was that creates my corner to be able to fold over. And we're going to see that in the end. So here we go again. I'm going to pull that out, pull this over so that it makes a triangle. Using my, and it can be anything straight, we're going to fold that over. Let's do that again. Making that nice and straight, and then we pull it out. And then we reset the needle right there. And we continue sewing. Now, one thing I see that I'm a little disappointed about is that my walking foot does not do a 1/4 inch seam, so that's a little wider than I need it to be. That could make some challenges for me, but no worries, I can fix it with trimming. Now, this is why I left all this extra to finish it. Because we need to connect these. Please behave, camera, come on. So now I'm going to lay this out. Putting these two ends together. And I am going to iron. Now I need to sew these two ends together, and that's why you want a lot of edge left so you can do that. So you've got plenty of room to work with. So because I made the ironing lines, I'm going to pin my ironing lines together. And I want to double check my work because I want those two to fold together. I think that's going to be right. So now I'm going to sew these two pieces together. Now before I cut it, I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure that's going to be perfectly right before I cut it, because once we cut it, it's done for. So that looks perfect. Let's finish sewing it down. So now that that is on there, I can go ahead and trim the quilt. We are in the home stretch. I need to finish the binding. I need to put the appliques on it, and then I need to add all the personal touches that make my garden quilt come alive for my little Rosemary. And we're going to do that in the next video. Well, friends, as always, I really appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for watching to this point, and be sure to be watching for the final video as I finish Baby Rosemary's quilt, and I've got a few days to spare. I leave a week from tomorrow, so I have plenty of time to finish. I'm so excited. This has gone together much more quickly than I expected, and that's a relief. All right, thanks so much for watching, friends. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. I'd love you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.